Hello Year 6, today we're going to continue coding our adventure game. So to open your work from last week, you need to click on your username and go to My Stuff. You then need to click on your game and then click C inside. And then you can continue coding. So at the end of last lesson, I told all of you to add a treasure chest to the third room and to display a message. So if I click on backdrops and go to the backdrops tab, I have room 1, room 2 and room 3. But there's a problem because last lesson we didn't code room 3. So we need to click player and we need to make sure that if the player is touching the door in room 2, that they can go to room 3. So looking at our code, the code that changes the room is this here. So it says if touching colour, change it to room 2. But the problem with that is that whenever it touches orange, it will just keep going to the second room. So if we click on this, we can actually change it to next backdrop. And then remove the set room to 2 and let's see if that works. So let's go. And then it's in the next room. And now it's in the last room. But the problem is that the room number didn't change. So all we can do is go to variables and we can change room by 1. So let's see if that works. Restart the game. I'm going to go to the orange door and now it's changed to room 2. Now I can't go back to the previous room, so now we need to add code to go back to the previous backdrop when we touch the yellow door. So what you can do is you can right click on this and duplicate it. You can just put it on the side. I can then change this colour and use the picker tool to the yellow, and then I'm going to switch the backdrop to previous backdrop. I now want to change the room by -1 because I'm going to be going backwards. Now let's try that. If I go to the orange and then the yellow, it's taken me back to the previous room. But what problem do you notice with where my sprite is? Do you think once it goes through the door, it will go back to the beginning of the room? Where should it be? So your sprite should be somewhere around here. Now if you look at these numbers here, we have X and Y. So I'm going to use the go to block and drag that underneath and then change it to 203 and -1. So let's test that out. And when I go to the yellow door, it brings me to this position here. So your challenge was to add a treasure chest to the last room and for it to say something when the player interacts with it. So if we look at our code for the sign, we're going to need something similar. And what I can actually do is copy the code to the chest by dragging this to the chest sprite, and now the code should appear. If it comes up double, you can just delete the blocks, so don't worry about that. Okay, so because we only want the chest to show in room 3, we're going to change this to 3. And we want it to say a different message, so because the player has found it, we're going to say well done. Let's test it. I'm now in room 2, but if I go through the doors, I can now see the treasure chest, and if I touch it, it says well done. We are now going to add code for our person sprite, which is another sprite that our player can interact with. So if you look at the code, it's quite similar to the sign code. We want it to have this position, and if it's touching the player, we want it to say this message. So I'm just going to copy that. It says, did you know that you can go through orange and yellow doors? So what I'm going to do is just copy this code to the person. And then we only want it to show in room 1. So I can change the backdrop by clicking backdrops and going to room 1. So I know what it will look like. I'm just going to drag it to the position I like. So if it's in room 1, I want it to show, but if it's not, I want it to hide. And if it's touching the player, I want it to say, did you know that you can go through orange and yellow doors? I also want it to move and if it touches the edge it's going to bounce back, just to make it look like the sprite is moving. So where it says say blank, we're going to move one step, and if it's on the edge we're going to bounce, so it means it'll just pop back. So let's press play. So it's going to be walking back and forth. We can also set the position that we want at the beginning, so 0 and minus 150. So if I drag this block here, put it at the top, 0 and minus 150 is always going to stay in that position. And remember, for the direction we don't want it to rotate, so just click on it and choose do not rotate, and we press play. When it touches the edge of the screen, it's going to bounce back in the opposite direction. We're now going to add patrolling enemies to our game, so if the player sprite touches the enemy, the game ends. So we already have one enemy sprite, but you can add as many as you like. And we want this enemy to show in room 2, so I just want to make sure I know what backdrop 2 looks like by going to that view. Okay, to add an enemy, I'm going to click on the enemy sprite. So you already have one here, but if you like, you can right click this and duplicate so you have multiple enemies. Now we want the enemy to only appear in room 2. So what I can do is copy the code from here, or I can just code it again. I'm just going to drag that to enemy. So make sure you click on the enemy sprite, and we only want the enemy to show in room 2. And then we can get rid of this part, and we can go to events and use another when flag clicked. We'll need a forever block to always check if it's touching, and then control, so if then. We can then go to sensing, and if it's touching, change this to player. We go to control and we want to stop all, so it's to stop the game. So if I press play and I go to the next room and I touch the enemy, then the game should stop. We're now going to add some code to make the sprite move, similar to how the player moves. So we want to set its original position to 170 and 0. So make sure you click the enemy sprite, and I'm going to use an event and motion, go to, so 170. So I'm now in room 2, and the enemy's position is going to be around here. I then want it to repeat 130 times, going back and forth. Or I can set it to if on edge bounce. So let's see which one will work better. So we're going to use a control block for forever, and we want to make it move left and right. So move one step, and if on edge bounce. So the sprite is now moving. The problem is that it's going over the line. So what I can do is add code where it checks if it's touching. So if, and go to sensing, touching color, and then select the color. So it's touching the color, we want it to point in direction, and we want it to point 90 degrees, so let's test that. I'm now in room 2, so when the enemy touches the grey wall, it should bounce back. And this can happen again and again as long as you're playing the game. Because the problem with this code is it's only going to do it for 130 times, and then after that the sprite is just going to stop. Our next challenge is to add another enemy sprite in room 3 that patrols up and down through the gap in the wall. So I'm just going to go to backdrops and click on backdrop 3 just so I can see what it looks like. And I'm just going to hide enemy 1 for now so it doesn't confuse me. So to add the enemy, what we can do is right click and duplicate the first enemy, and always make sure that you're coding enemy. So click on it and click on show. So because we only want the new enemy to show in room 3, I need to change this to room 3. We also don't need the if touching color block because this sprite is only going to move up and down. So I'm just going to drag it into position. I want it to start somewhere here, so that's -4. So type that into the block, and -163. And I want it to move up and down at the same speed as the previous enemy. So after that, we need to make sure when we click on enemy 2 that the direction is set to up, which is 0 degrees, and that it has a no rotation style. So if it touches the edge of the screen, it will bounce back and it will always move one step. So I can click on this to test the code. So it's moving up, and then when it touches the edge of the screen, it's just going to bounce back down. But remember, we have this code here, so if the player touches the enemy, the game will stop. The next part is to add the coins to our game, and we want to add code so that the coin only appears in room 1. We then want some code that changes how many coins the player has when it touches it. So let's go to the coin. You can press stop here, and I'm just going to change the backdrop to room 1, and I can show the coin. I can maybe place it around here. So I'll go to events when flag clicked, and then control forever. And then we need an if else block. So if, with our operators, if our variable room is equal to 1, then we'll go to looks and we want to show the coin. Otherwise we want it to hide. We now need code that's going to wait until the player touches it. So we need to create a coins variable. So go to variables and make a variable. I'm going to call it coins and press OK. So now we need another event block and then a wait until, which is in control. So wait until, and then sensing, touching, and change that to player. Then once it's touching the player, we can go to variables and change the number of coins by 1, so that will go up. Then after that, we want to hide it because it's been collected, and we can go to control. I now need to add a stop block and choose other scripts in Sprite. So if I press green and I collect the coin, it's now going to disappear. I now need to make sure that the coin is set to 0 at the beginning of the game. So go to variables and set coins to 0. So when I press play, the coin is set to 0. We're now going to add a locked door to our game, and this is going to need a key and an inventory. So we need to create a new list. So go to variables and create make a list. We're going to call this inventory and click OK. So when we collect the key, it will let us know. So we need to click on the key and click on show. And we are going to use similar code to the coin one here. So I can just drag that to the key. Make sure you click the key afterwards. So wait until touching player, and then we need to add key to our inventory. We then want it to hide, and then again we are going to go to control and we're going to stop all other scripts in Sprite. We only want this sprite to show in room 3, so that means I need this code here. So I went to enemy, I'm just going to drag that to my key, click on the key and change this to room 3. If I look at the backdrops, the key is going to be placed somewhere around here, but I need to also make sure that at the beginning of the game that everything is deleted from the list. So delete all of inventory so that it's an empty list. So let's test what happens when I add the key to it. I'm now in room 3. If I touch the key, it's going to hide and it's been added to my inventory. I now need to add the locked door sprite, so that's going to appear here. So if I click on that and show, I need to add this code to it so that it only shows in room 3 as well. If your inventory is really big, you can just click on the corner until the arrows appear and then just make it really small. And then you can just drag it into the position that you like, but make sure it's not somewhere that is going to affect the game. So maybe I can move coins here and inventory there. So I need similar code to this. Now I want it to wait until the player has the key for it to open. So if I use another when flag clicked and then a wait until block, I need to go to variables and look for inventory contained. So inventory contains key, and then we want it to hide and stop all sprites in this script. So now my inventory is empty. I can collect the coin, go to the next room. I can read the sign. I shouldn't touch the enemy, go to the next room, and then collect the key, and then I can now walk through and then get to the chest. Now there's a challenge at the end which asks you to extend your world, so you might want to add more coins to your game, you might even want to change the background, you can add sound and music, or more people and enemies, you could also add more doors to go to other rooms, and maybe add other useful items to your game that the player needs to collect. I hope you'll have fun creating your own adventure game, and remember at the end, click File, Save Now, and then if you click Share and click on See Project Page, you can actually copy the link at the top and share it on Microsoft Teams so that I can have a look at your work. Good luck!